Thank you. So I will now try to give you the very big picture about uh, how the geopolitical relations have changed in the last, let's say, 10 years. This change was happening or started to be very visible that it's happening. And in order to explain this change and to understand in what kind of the geopolitical relations we are today, I will a little bit describe where we have been, how the world before looked like, the world in a sense of the geopolitical relations, and then to understand what is the situation now. This is very important, I think, for us to understand because a lot of the things, how we think, a lot of our expectations, and even many things what we do, for example, in our advocacy, is following the patterns or following the way how the world has operated before. But we are not in that world anymore. And then that's the part of the reason why we are less effective. That's not the only reason. Another bigger reason is that current world is a very complicated, very unstable, and very turbulent. So it's not easy to achieve what we want to achieve. But it's a very, very important, I think, to have a clarity that we are, how I put it here, in a very different world. Now, to understand what is different, uh, we can start with this, understanding the three phases through which the world has gone since the Second World War. So the first era has been this Cold War era, or the bipolar world, where basically kind of the dominant thing in the international relation has been rivalry and competition of the US-led Western democracy capitalist bloc on one side and the communist one-party centralized economy on the other side. And that was what we had between end of the Second World War and 1991. During this period, also very important process of the decolonization happened in the first 2 decades after the Second World War. So this is another story from this period. But even decolonization then pushed the decolonized country into either one of these two blocks, or they became the place of the competition between these two blocks, or some countries, decolonized country, try to be non-aligned movement, meaning try to not take the side in this rivalry, but at the end of the day, they have, even if they have been non-aligned, they have always been a little bit closer to one or another. After the end of the Cold War era, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, we have been relatively short period of the time in something what we can describe as a unipolar world, the world in which the United States and the West has been the dominant hegemon. We can also describe that era, and I prefer to describe it as a globalization era, because that has been the main thing happening during this period, the rapid globalization. We can describe it also as the era of the democratic optimism, because that has been an era in which it has been believed that from now on, democracy will gradually spread all around the world. And that era can also be described as an era of the liberal world order. And, uh, and this is this previous world, which has in many profound ways influenced how we think. And how we advocate, for example. So when, for example, you are at the beginning during the Spring Revolution, when you have been calling for the responsibility to protect and for the international intervention, that has been expectation coming from this previous world. From the first day of the coup, I have known that there is no responsibility for the protect, because I have already known in that moment that we are in a different world. You know, today when you still do a lot of human rights advocacy, when you are trying to draw attention of the outside players with the suffering of the people of the Myanmar, with the crimes which junta are committing. These are all the patterns of the advocacies which have worked in a previous world, but they don't work anymore. And I can go on and give you many, many other examples. Let's say how the things what we do are following the way of the thinking and the arguments and narratives from the previous world, but they don't work anymore. And I will try to explain it more during this session. Now, when we ask ourselves how the current world looks like, then many actors, particularly many actors in Asia, but also many actors in Africa, in Latin Americas, they try and they would like to describe this new era as a multipolar world. And you will hear very, very often many leaders of the world talking about the multipolar world. And I will try to explain you today that we are not in the multipolar world. And different countries are talking about that. Different countries, some of these countries which are talking about that would like really to have the multipolar world, but we don't have it. We don't have it, and we don't know whether we will have it. So where we are now is in a situation in which this previous world, either we describe it as a unipolar or the liberal world or the era of the globalization, that has ended. We will not go back. But the new world order has still not been created. There are still not equilibrium. There is still no balance in the international relations. So we are now in the middle of the very dynamic instability, even turbulent instability, in a situation in which kind of the relations between the countries, and primarily power relations, but then all other relations between the countries are changing. And we don't know what will be the new equilibrium. And we don't know how long it will take before the new equilibrium will be created. So to stay a little bit longer on this topic of the multipolar world, who is talking today about multipolar world? The first two countries which are talking about that are Russia and China. Both of them are saying we don't want the US hegemony. We want the more fair world. And that means, and they claim, multipolar world. Neither Russia nor China really want to have a multipolar world. They are talking about that, but they don't want to have it. What the China and Russia want, they want to destroy the liberal world order. But then they want to basically to create the new world and new equilibrium, which will be organized in a way that the three key powers will divide the world between them, their sphere of influence. And particularly Russia thinks in that way. So that they would like to China and Russia to push United States in a certain way to the Western Hemisphere and say US can be the big boss in a Western Hemisphere. That means North America, South America. Russia will become the dominant power in Eurasia. That means current Russia, former Soviet Union countries plus Europe. And the China will be the dominant power in the Asia and probably in the Pacific. China is even more ambitious, but they are also strategically patient. Let's say for China, in this moment, the thinking is to preserve the globalization because that still works very well for the China economy, but at the same time, try to reorganize international relations in a way that, yes, the world is partly divided by China becoming dominant in the Indo-Pacific. US is pushed to the Western Hemisphere. And then as a next step, China basically replacing the US as a new global hegemon. So when Russia and China are talking about the multipolar world, they don't really want to have fair relations with the many different mid-size countries having the equal balanced decision-making power. What they want to reorganize world in a way that the liberal world order is destroyed and that either the world is divided in a new sphere of influence or, as a second step, China is becoming a new hegemon. Then we have countries like India, South Africa, Brazil, which are kind of the relatively kind of the major regional power. India is maybe growing slowly in something more than just being the regional power, but it will take them 20 years at least to move from the regional power and to start really to be able to compete for the global influence, because India still doesn't have a military power for that. They are economically catching up, but militarily they are very, very far away to project the global power. So these countries would really like to have a multipolar world. So when they speak about multipolar world, they genuinely want it. But the problem is that they don't have a power to impose or to influence the creation of the multipolar world. Because when they talk about multipolar world, then they expect that the new world will look like that all countries of the bigger size. It means United States, European Union, India, South Africa, Brazil, China, Japan, and so on, that all of them will be kind of the equal in jointly regulating and governing the peace and economy and prosperity in a world. But when you don't have a strong military power and concentrated economic power to stabilize these equilibrium, then you don't have the equilibrium. Then you have the rivalry of the many, many different countries. So for that reason, let's say, because the most powerful countries don't really want multipolar world, even if they are talking about that, And those countries who really would like to have it don't have really power to make it happen. Is the reason why I'm saying we are not anywhere close to the multipolar world. And it's a very, very questionable whether we will ever come there. But what is certain that we are not in a world as it has it been before. And it's a certain that we are now in a period which might last, couple of decades, in a very turbulent global instability, not just kind of the instability in one country like war in Myanmar, war in Palestine, and so on, but the global instability. Uh, Now, if I go back again a little bit in explaining how the previous world looked like. Uh, then there has been a couple of important elements. One is this liberal world order. And let me just explain you a little bit more what this liberal world order means. That has been basically the system of the international relations and the ideal for the governance in the relations between the countries and for the governance in the countries, which has been basically kind of established after the Second World War under the leadership of the United States. And that liberal world order has been partly result of the Second World War, after which all major powers basically wanted to secure peace. And that's why they created the United Nations and agreed to have a United Nations, to have a UN Charter and other things, to try to protect the world from the new big conflict. But partly this liberal world order has been promoted, sustained by the United States and their Western allies as a way how to contain, how to keep under the control communism from spreading to the other part of the world outside of the Soviet Union and China and their spheres of the influence. So the key elements of this liberal world order has been that democratic governance is kind of the norm. Not all countries have it. Most of the countries didn't have it. But that was kind of the desired wish, how it should be, to have a free and fair elections, to have respect for the human rights, to have a rule of law. The second important element has been this economic liberalism, that there is a free trade, opening of the markets, economic cooperations between the countries. The third element has been this multilateralism, that basically the countries are solving problems between themselves through the cooperation and mainly within the UN, that the countries do not try to change the borders of the other countries, that sovereignty of the countries are respected, so that somebody is powerful and then just kind of occupy other countries. So that has been, unaccepted, at least as a prevailing norm. That human rights are universal value which needs to be protected around the world, and that the countries need to respect the international law and the international norms. And then in this liberal world order, there has been also this strong tendency to create the alliances in order to kind of stabilize the world. Another very important, element of this liberal world order and this globalization era has been an ideological package of the economic neoliberalism, political liberal democracy, and cultural liberalism. And I will explain all three concepts. And after the end of the Cold War, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, during this globalization era, these three things people believed and promoted it as a being together, being one package. That means that economically, all countries should become capitalist. And not only that they should become capitalist, but that all countries should have the free market economy in which there is a so-called small state and there is a lot of freedom for the private businesses, private investment. There is no barriers for the flow of the trade and for the flow of the capital. So this is kind of this neoliberal economic doctrine or neoliberal economic ideology. Politically, that has been formulated that we should have a democratic political system, free and fair elections, free party competition, elections, parliamentary democracy, or democracies, parliamentary or presidential, rule of law, and so on. And the third thing, this cultural liberalism has included in itself expanded spectrum of the rights and freedoms, so that included that not only basic rights should be protected, but also we should have the gender equality, we should have a LGBT equality or tolerance, we should have a be tolerant and open to the migrants coming from one country crisis spot to another, and so on and so on. So we created this kind of the cultural liberal doctrine or ideology, very, very progressive one, and in a certain way dominant ideology, and has been all these three things go together: neoliberal economy, political democracy, liberal democracy, and cultural tolerance or cultural liberalism. And they should go together. And all the countries will become like that. And it will be better world for everybody. What is the situation now? The situation now is basically all these three elements are under serious question and under serious attack for different reasons. Let's say now we are in a situation that there is a growing understanding that neoliberal economy is very good for some and very, very bad for others. Give me just 1 second. I just need to put the dog in a just a second. Iko, dođi. Dođi. So, so this is kind of the when it comes to the economy, that basically kind of the economy doesn't work for many. It works for some neoliberal economy. The second thing now, the concept of the democracy and liberal democracy is under the attack everywhere, from authoritarian regimes as well as from the populists in a democratic countries. And the cultural liberalism, this kind of the progressive set of the values, let's say that we should respect human rights, that we should be tolerant to the migrants, that we should have a gender equality, that we should be inclusive toward the LGBT and other minorities. This is under heavy attack by the populist authoritarians and the religious conservative circles. Uh, Let me now. So this is kind of what has uh, uh, what has changed? Let me now give a very kind of the quick summary of how the world has changed. What is different now? So first thing, the so-called international community does not exist anymore. We still operate. We still talk about international community. We still have the international institutions in, UN in the New York, in Geneva, the, different international and regional institutions in Strasbourg, the international court in Hague, and so on and so on. But these international institutions, in a certain way, they do exist. I call it, they pretend that they are working, but they don't work anymore because they became just the playground of the rivalry of the big powers which are trying to reorganize and redefine the world. So in a certain way, these institutions cannot deliver any more results, let's say, because either decision making is blocked, or decision making is in a certain constant rivalry which doesn't basically solve any major crisis around the world. So Myanmar is not the only place in a world where we have a terrible war, terrible human suffering. There are many, many other places around the world. Some of them you are aware, like Gaza. Some of them, like Sudan and Yemen and a couple of others, you are even not aware because they are never in the news. But there are many other places where are very terrible things are happening, and international system is not able in any way to deal with those crises, not even to provide the humanitarian aid, not to talk about anything else. And what that means if the international community does not, function anymore, then we should be very, very careful not to have a false expectations what the international mechanisms can deliver and what they cannot deliver. And we should better understand that we are back in the era of the geopolitical rivalries, very serious geopolitical rivalries. And then we need basically to find a way how we play for our own benefit these rivalries, instead of expecting that there are some rules and that there are any country which feel obliged to follow the international rules. The second big important change is that in a current world, democracies no longer actively support democratic struggles. They have been ready to do it. United States and European Union and other democracies have been ready to support democratic struggles in other parts of the world 15 years ago, but not anymore, because they are now less capable to do it. They really have less influence because in the meantime, China, Russia, and some other countries became another centers of the power, who have a capital, who have a technology, and so on. But also the Western democracies have resigned on the ambition to help spread the democracy around the world. They don't want to do that anymore. And that's the part of the reason when we kind of go around the world and talk about us in Myanmar struggling for democracy, why we are finding so little real meaningful assistance. We still find, the rhetorical support, but we don't get the meaningful support because the Western democracies, or democracies in general, Western and Asian, are not really ready anymore and willing to support democracy. They simply shifted their interest somewhere else. On the other side, we are unfortunately today in a world in which autocrats on the other sides are very ready to quickly jump and help other autocrats. Because autocrats, China and Russia primarily, but then some others as well, are in this interventionist mode. You know, 15 years ago, the West has been ready to do interventions. West has been ready to do intervention in my country, in Bosnia. West has been ready to do intervention in Rwanda. It has been ready to do intervention in Libya, in Iraq. But now, not anymore. But the authoritarian countries are ready to jump in when there is another dictator who is under the pressure of the people from his own country, and then in a different way try to help him survive. Uh, where that is bringing us? That is bringing us in a situation which, some people are describing as a zone of danger. That, as I mentioned, we don't have equilibrium, which has existed under the Cold War era, as it has been existed during this globalization, unipolar world era. But we are now in this kind of turbulent in-between times, which means, let's say, that the major international conflict is not something what can be excluded. Hopefully, it will not happen, but we are in a very, very unpredictable situation. Let me share two, three more very profound changings, which I think it's important for us to have in mind as well. One thing is that 20 or 30 years ago, there has been belief that the technological development, IT technologies, are favoring freedom, democracy, and middle class. That there will be, new technological revolution with the IT technology, which will simply bring, better information around the world, better communication among the people, more efficient economy. And in a certain way, we will all, thanks to that, become more free and more prosperous, that we will become a richer society. And for certain period of the time, the IT technology really have driven the world in that direction. But today, the development of the IT technology and artificial intelligence is basically doing exactly the opposite. Today, the technological revolution has significantly increased capacity to control the people, to manipulate people, and to enslave people. And China is extreme example how they are advancing and developing something what is called authoritarian or kind of digital totalitarianism, total digital control of the society by the ruling elites. And China is very far in that direction. And they are trying to now, expand it and help others, develop in other countries these authoritarian total control. The second thing, the rapid development of the artificial intelligence, robotic capacities are destroying the jobs of the people around the world. In a certain way, we are entering in the very kind of dangerous era, in which basically people will not be necessary anymore. Because through whole history, you needed people to produce the wealth. And suddenly we are now in a situation that capital, the big money, can in a certain way invest and create machines which are producing the wealth, and they don't need people anymore. which is scary, scary. Hopefully, and probably will not go in that direction, but the prospect is scary. The next very important thing, what most of the people don't think about that. We are somehow, we forgot to think about economy. But today, neoliberal global economy does not favor democracy anymore. So the current global economic system is much more benefiting the autocratic regimes and the oligarchic and kleptocratic regimes. Because what's happening now in more and more places in the world, that those who capture the political power, they try to consolidate these political power or political and repressive power. And then they use these political or the political and repressive power to capture the economy, everything what is profitable in economy in their countries, so that suddenly they are not just the dominant political or security elite, but at the same time, the same people, the same families, the same narrow group is becoming the owner of everything what is profitable in economy. And then they are creating the alliances with the other similar regimes who are primarily trying to keep the power in order to keep the wealth, and they are making them some more wealth, which is putting them in a position to kind of consolidate power even more. And in a certain way, this is the story of the Myanmar. You know it very well, because the Myanmar military is not really military anymore. They are mafia system in which the top military families have captured the economic wealth of the country, and they are now trying at any cost. They are ready to destroy the whole country. They are ready to kill to kill all the people in a country in order to keep the economic natural resources, in order to kind of keep their kleptocratic benefits and luxury lives, and become the part of the other big rich people around the world who are buying England football teams, so that Arab Arab rich people have their own clubs, and the American rich people have their own clubs, and the Asian rich people have their own clubs, and the Russian rich people have their own clubs, and then they are part of these kind of the new global rich autocratic elites. So this is the big story of the world today. That in a certain way we still talk and think about there are free societies, democratic societies, and there are authoritarian societies. But behind that, there is something much more important for today's world. That we basically have this kind of the kleptocratic alliance of the political narrow groups of the people who have captured the political power. They use this political and security power to capture economic power, and now these two things are feeding each other. So we have the state capitalism in China, we have mafia capitalism in Russia, we have oil autocratic states in Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates. We have the Islamic State in Iran. We have a military-backed regimes in Egypt, in Thailand, and some other places. We have these illiberal, populist, strong rulers like Modi in India, like Erdogan in Turkey. And all of them, these are all very different political systems. But there is something unifying, something what brings all of them together. And this is that all of them have captured use the political power to capture the economic power. And they want to preserve political power at any cost. in order to preserve these ill-earned economic power. So this is one of the reasons why I'm already for some time also, talking to the people involved in a spring revolution. Don't think only about democracy. Don't think only about federalism and ethnic right, but also think about economy. That's it. Because currently, we as a Spring Revolution, we have a plan what we want to do with the democracy. We have a plan what we do want to do with the federalism, but we have, as far as I know, zero plan how we want to fix the future Myanmar economy. So, and that's the reason why I'm saying we need also certain groups of the educated people who are not involved in a daily struggle, but who are preparing economic plans for the future Myanmar. Because in today's world, the key is not only in a political power and in the whatever ethnic equality in a federal system, but the key is what's happening in the economy and how we regain the wealth which has been accumulated in a hands of the previous regime. And the third thing, last thing, and then I will stop now. The last thing what I wanted to mention is that there is a rising wave or the rising tide of the conservative fundamentalist political religious movement around the world. Because I mentioned you before that, in a previous era, we had this kind of the market economy plus liberal democracy plus cultural liberalism as a dominant ideology. But what's happening now in the world that in many places we are having the rising tide of the right wing, very passionately illiberal, conservative religious political movements. And you have examples, from Myanmar. You know that example from the Mabata. Mabata is about that. Mabata was created by the military intelligence services. But once when it has been activated, let's say it basically became this kind of the strong religious political movement which is successful in mobilizing a lot of people in a country behind the very conservative, very anti-freedom, anti-liberalism, very authoritarian concept. And these similar things are happening in India. Modi is constantly playing on this card of the Hindutva, and it's successfully so. Let's say it's not just that he's manipulating. He's partly manipulating, partly it's a genuine movement. There are Erdogan is playing the same thing in Turkey. The Orban is playing the same kind of the narratives with the Christianity in Hungary, and in America we have this evangelistic movement who is strongly standing behind Trump, and which want basically America to stop to be democracy, to stop to be the liberal democracy and become the theocratic, evangelistic, authoritarian state. So this is another big challenge, let's say, that when we stand behind the progressive values, we should understand that we are facing today challenge not only of the authoritarianism, but also of this very conservative fundamentalist movement. And we need to think about how we are most successful in persuading people not to follow the ideology and the rhetoric of these conservative movements. So let me stop now because I have overwhelmed you with the many informations, and I will be happy to respond on some questions. And if we will have some additional time, I will maybe also come a little bit back to explain what the China wants in a current world and why, what Russia wants, and what the United States wants as the three key main countries. But before going into that, I wanted to open the floor for the questions, answers, or whatever.